I'm Luna, 26, and I'm standing in a hospital corridor watching my older brother Hugo block me from meeting my nephew for the first time. "You're not welcome here," he says, his voice cold as winter. "You've always been a bad influence on Jade. Where are you watching from today?" Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt rejected by your own family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. You know what's funny about family? They'll tell you they love you right before they crush your soul. Hugo has always been the golden child. Perfect grades, perfect job, perfect everything. Me? I was the afterthought, the sister who never quite measured up to his shining example. When we were teenagers, Hugo started dating my best friend Jade. At first, I thought it was amazing, my two favorite people together. But Hugo didn't see it that way. He saw me as competition for Jade's attention. Every sleepover, every girls' night, every moment Jade and I shared became a threat to his control. "She's a bad influence," he told our parents when I was 17. "Jade needs to focus on her future, not waste time with childish games." Those childish games? Study sessions for AP exams and college application prep. But Hugo painted me as the troublemaker leading his innocent girlfriend astray. Our parents, predictably, sided with their precious son. "Maybe you should give them space to grow their relationship," Mom suggested gently. Dad just nodded along, as he always did when Hugo spoke. So I learned to stay quiet, to make myself smaller, to not rock the boat. Hugo got his way, and Jade started pulling away from me. Not all at once. That would have been too obvious. Just gradual distance, canceled plans, shorter phone calls until we barely spoke at all. That was 8 years ago. 8 years of watching from the sidelines as my brother controlled every aspect of his relationship. 8 years of building my own life from scratch. Because nobody was going to hand me anything. While Hugo was playing perfect boyfriend with family money backing his every move, I was working 3 jobs to put myself through business school. While he was getting graduation parties and celebrations, I was grinding in silence, building a marketing consultancy from my studio apartment. Turns out, being the forgotten child has its advantages. Nobody expects much from you, so when you succeed, it hits different. My company now generates 7 figures annually. I own properties in 3 states. I've never asked my family for a penny because I learned early that everything comes with strings attached. But when Jade got pregnant, something shifted inside me. This was my chance to be the aunt I never had, to break the cycle of family dysfunction. When Hugo called to tell me about the pregnancy, I made him a promise that would change everything. "I want to be there when the baby comes," I told him. "Whatever happened between us in the past, this is about family." Hugo paused for so long I thought the call had dropped. "We'll see," he finally said. "Jade's having a difficult pregnancy. She needs to stay calm." Even then, he was setting up barriers. Even then, he was preparing to shut me out. But I hoped, that becoming an aunt would override his need to control everything. I was wrong. 3 months later, when Jade went into labor, I kept my promise. I cleared my schedule, loaded my car with gifts for the baby, and drove 12 hours straight through 2 states to get to their hospital. 12 hours of excitement, of imagining holding my nephew, of believing that this moment would heal the wounds in our family. 12 hours of driving toward what I thought would be a new beginning. Instead, I found my brother standing guard at the maternity ward entrance like a bouncer at an exclusive club, and the look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know about how this family reunion was going to end. "I drove 12 hours to be here," I managed to say through the shock. Hugo's expression didn't change. "Nobody asked you to." And that's when I realized that some people don't want healing. They want control. And my presence threatened the narrative Hugo had spent years constructing about his perfect little family. But sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of humor. Because 2 days later, my phone would ring with a call that would turn Hugo's carefully controlled world completely upside down. The drive home from that hospital was the longest 12 hours of my life. Not because of the distance, but because I spent every mile replaying years of family dysfunction, wondering how I'd been naive enough to think things would be different. You don't become a millionaire by accident. It takes strategy, persistence, and the kind of stubborn determination that comes from having something to prove. After Hugo systematically destroyed my friendship with Jade and my parents decided I was the problem child, I had 2 choices: crumble or climb. I chose to climb. My marketing consultancy started in my studio apartment with a laptop, a dream, and exactly $247 in my checking account. My first client was a local bakery that paid me in cash and day-old croissants. Not exactly glamorous, but it was mine. While Hugo was coasting on family connections and Dad's business network, I was cold calling potential clients and learning every aspect of digital marketing from YouTube videos. While he was getting handed opportunities, I was creating my own. The breakthrough came during my 3rd year in business. A tech startup hired me to rebrand their entire company. They were bleeding money, had terrible market presence, and their previous marketing team had quit in spectacular fashion. Perfect opportunity for someone desperate enough to work 18-hour days. 6 months later, their revenue had tripled. Word spreads fast in the business world when someone delivers those kinds of results. Suddenly, companies weren't just returning my calls, they were calling me first. By the time I turned 25, my consultancy had expanded to 15 employees and clients across 4 states. I bought my first property with cash, just to prove I could. Then a second, then a third. Success tastes different when you earn it yourself. There's no guilt, no strings attached, no family expectations weighing you down. Just the pure satisfaction of knowing that every dollar in your account exists because you made it happen. But money doesn't fill the family-shaped hole in your life. When Hugo called to tell me about Jade's pregnancy, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. "We're having a boy," he said. And for once, his voice didn't carry that familiar edge of superiority. "Jade's scared, but excited." "That's amazing," I replied, meaning it. "When's she due?" "Late November. The doctor says everything looks good so far." I took a breath, choosing my words carefully. "I'd like to be there when he's born. Hugo, I want to meet my nephew." Silence stretched between us. I could practically hear him calculating, weighing the pros and cons of including me in this moment. "We'll see how Jade's feeling closer to the time," he finally said. "Pregnancy hormones make women emotional. She needs stability." Classic Hugo, deflecting responsibility onto his pregnant wife while positioning himself as the reasonable protector. But I caught something in his voice that I'd never heard before. Uncertainty. "I understand," I said, though I understood more than he realized. "Just know that I'm here if you need anything. Family support, whatever you need." Another pause. "We're doing fine, Luna. We don't need anything." Of course not. Hugo had never needed anything from me. But babies change people. Or so I'd heard. Maybe becoming a father would soften some of his sharp edges. 2 weeks before Jade's due date, I got a text from an unknown number. "Luna, it's Jade. Can you call me? Hugo's at work." My hands shook as I dialed. Jade's voice sounded tired but warm when she answered. "I'm sorry for everything," she said without preamble. "I know Hugo's kept us apart all these years. I've missed you." Those words cracked something open in my chest. "I've missed you too. How are you feeling?" "Huge, uncomfortable, and terrified," she laughed. "But excited." "Luna, I want you to meet the baby. I need you to be here." "Are you sure?" Hugo seemed hesitant when I asked. "Hugo's been stressed about money lately. He's convinced that having family around will make me more anxious. But you've always calmed me down, even when we were teenagers." Money stress. That was interesting. Hugo had always projected an image of financial stability, but maybe the perfect facade was starting to crack. "I'll be there," I promised. "However long it takes to drive, I'll be there." "Thank you," Jade whispered. "It's going to be okay, right? All of this?" Something in her voice made me pause. Jade had always been confident, even as a teenager. This vulnerability was new. "Everything's going to be perfect," I assured her, though I had no way of knowing how wrong I was. When Jade went into labor on a Tuesday morning, I dropped everything. I canceled 3 client meetings, rearranged my entire week, and loaded my car with gifts I'd been collecting for months. A hand-carved wooden rocking horse, organic cotton onesies, a leather photo album for documenting the baby's first year. The 12-hour drive felt like a pilgrimage. For the first time in 8 years, I was driving toward my family instead of away from them. Every mile brought me closer to holding my nephew, to rebuilding my relationship with Jade, to proving that I could be the aunt this baby deserved. I imagined Hugo's face when he saw me walk into that hospital room. Maybe he'd finally realize that success hadn't made me bitter or vindictive. Maybe he'd see that I just wanted to love this baby and support them both. I was so lost in these fantasies that I almost missed the hospital exit. My heart was racing as I parked, grabbed the gift bags from my back seat, and walked toward the maternity ward entrance. That's where I found Hugo, arms crossed, blocking the doorway like I was some kind of threat, instead of the baby's aunt who'd driven across 2 states to be there. And that's when I learned that some fantasies are just that, fantasies. The hospital parking lot felt different on the way out, emptier. The gift bags that had weighed down my arms on the walk-in were now sitting in my back seat, unopened, like artifacts from a future that would never happen. I sat in my car for 20 minutes before starting the engine, trying to process what had just occurred. Hugo's words kept echoing. "You're not welcome here. You've always been a bad influence." The worst part wasn't the rejection itself. It was how unsurprised I felt by it. Deep down, I'd known this was possible. I'd spent 8 years watching Hugo systematically control every aspect of his relationship with Jade. Why would the birth of their child be any different? But hoping had felt so good. For 12 hours on the drive there, I'd let myself imagine being part of a real family again. Walking into that hospital room and seeing Jade's tired but happy face. Holding my nephew for the first time. Taking pictures to commemorate the moment our family grew. Instead, I got Hugo's security guard routine and a reminder that blood doesn't always mean belonging. The drive home was a blur of gas stations, highway rest stops, and my own thoughts spinning in circles. I analyzed every interaction I'd had with Hugo and Jade over the past few months, looking for signs I'd missed. Had Jade really wanted me there, or had Hugo pressured her into that phone call? Was there something I'd done recently to trigger his hostility? By hour 8 of the return trip, I'd reached a different conclusion. It didn't matter. Hugo's need to control his environment was stronger than any family bond we might have shared, and I was tired of making myself smaller to accommodate his insecurities. My phone buzzed with notifications throughout the drive. Business contacts, client messages, the normal rhythm of a successful life. None from Hugo, none from Jade. The silence was its own message. When I finally pulled into my driveway at 2 a.m, exhaustion hit me like a physical weight. 24 hours of driving for nothing. 24 hours of hope wasted. I left the gift bags in my car. Looking at them would only remind me of how naive I'd been to think this time would be different. My house felt too quiet after the constant road noise. I poured a glass of wine and sat on my couch staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to call Hugo to demand an explanation or at least the courtesy of a real conversation. Part of me wanted to call our parents and tell them what their golden child had done. But I did neither. Because the truth was, I wasn't surprised. And you can't be surprised by something you've been expecting your entire life. Instead, I went to bed, hoping that morning would bring some clarity about what came next. I'd spent years building a life independent of my family's drama. Maybe it was time to stop trying to force connections that clearly weren't meant to exist. Sleep came eventually, filled with dreams about empty hospital rooms and gifts that would never be opened. I woke up Wednesday morning with a plan: dive back into work, focus on my clients, and forget about family fantasies that only led to disappointment. I had 3 major campaigns launching that week and a new client presentation on Friday. Real accomplishments that mattered to people who actually valued my contribution. Thursday passed normally. Client calls, strategy sessions, the comfortable routine of professional success. I barely thought about Hugo or the hospital, or at least, I told myself I didn't. Friday morning brought a sense of normalcy I hadn't felt since driving away from that maternity ward. I was reviewing presentation slides when my assistant buzzed my office phone. "Luna, there's a call for you. Someone from Riverside Regional Hospital." My stomach dropped. Had something happened to Jade or the baby? Despite everything, the thought of either of them being hurt made my chest tight with worry. "I'll take it," I said, grabbing the phone. "Ms. Martinez?" The voice was professional, businesslike. "This is Sarah from Patient Financial Services at Riverside Regional. I'm calling regarding the birth expenses for baby Noah Martinez." Noah. My nephew had a name now. "I think you have the wrong number," I said. "I'm not responsible for any medical bills at your hospital. According to our records, your brother Hugo Martinez informed our billing department that his millionaire sister would be covering all delivery expenses. The total comes to $10,147. How would you like to handle payment today?" The words hit me like a physical blow. Hugo had used my success, the thing I'd built independently of family support, as collateral for his own responsibilities. Without asking, without permission, with the casual assumption that my money was available to solve his problems. I gripped the phone tighter, my professional composure warring with pure rage. "Ma'am," the billing representative continued, "how would you prefer to arrange payment?" This was the moment, the exact moment when everything would change between my brother and me. Because what I said next would determine whether I'd spend the rest of my life being Hugo's unofficial bank account, or whether I'd finally set the boundaries I should have established years ago. I took a deep breath and made the choice that would trigger everything that came after. "Ma'am, are you there?" Sarah from Patient Financial Services repeated, her voice cutting through my stunned silence. "Yes," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm here, but I think there's been a significant misunderstanding." "How so?" "I never authorized payment for anyone's medical expenses at your hospital. I've never even spoken to anyone from your billing department." A pause. The sound of typing. I have a note here from Hugo Martinez stating that his sister Luna would be handling all costs associated with his wife's delivery and their son's medical care. Luna. He'd even used my name specifically, not my family or someone else. My name, as if I'd personally guaranteed payment for a bill I'd never agreed to cover. Ms. Martinez, do you have any documentation showing that you agreed to be financially responsible for these charges? No, Sarah said, her professional tone wavering slightly. We typically rely on verbal confirmation from family members for arrangements like this. Then you have your answer. I did not verbally confirm anything because no one asked me. I am not responsible for this bill. More typing. A longer pause. I see. I apologize for the confusion, Ms. Martinez. The charges will remain under Mr. Hugo Martinez's name, and will contact him directly regarding payment arrangements. That would be appropriate, I said. Though my hands were shaking with anger, I was carefully controlling. Thank you for calling to clarify. After hanging up, I sat in my office chair, staring at my computer screen without seeing it. Hugo had rejected me at the hospital, humiliated me in front of the staff, made it clear I wasn't welcome in his child's life. And then, 2 days later, he'd told the billing department that his millionaire sister would pay for everything. The calculation was breathtaking in its audacity. I was good enough to be his personal ATM, but not good enough to hold his baby. My assistant knocked on my door. Luna, your 11 o'clock is here. Give me 5 more minutes, I said, needing time to compartmentalize this rage before facing a client. But as I tried to focus on marketing strategies and campaign timelines, my phone started ringing. Hugo's name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. And again. The 4th time, I answered. What do you want, Hugo? Luna, thank God. Listen, there's been a misunderstanding at the hospital. They're saying they can't discharge Jade and Noah until the bill is paid. But our insurance isn't covering everything, and... Stop. My voice cut through his rambling explanation like a blade. Just stop. Look, I know you're upset about Tuesday, but this is about Jade and the baby. They can't go home until... Until what, Hugo? Until I pay the $10,000 you promised them I would cover? Without asking me first? Silence. You told the hospital your millionaire sister would handle the expenses, after you banned that same sister from even meeting her nephew. Do you see the problem with this logic? Luna, please. This isn't about us. Jade is exhausted, the baby needs to come home. And you just need my money. After making it crystal clear that you don't need my presence, my support, or my relationship with your family. Don't be dramatic. This is different. That phrase, don't be dramatic, was Hugo's greatest hit. Anytime I'd expressed hurt feelings as a child, anytime I'd complained about being excluded or dismissed, Hugo would roll his eyes and tell me not to be dramatic. Well, I was done minimizing my feelings to make him comfortable. You're right, Hugo. This is different. This time you need something from me. And this time I get to decide whether you deserve it. What's that supposed to mean? It means I drove 12 hours to meet my nephew, and you stopped me at the door. It means you humiliated me in front of hospital staff and made it clear that I'm not family when it comes to anything important. But apparently I become family again when you need my checkbook. Luna, I'm not finished. My voice was calm now, professional. The same tone I used when explaining to clients why their marketing budgets couldn't cover their unrealistic expectations. You want to know what I told the billing department? I told them the truth. I never authorized payment for anything. The bill stays in your name, where it belongs. The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. You can't be serious, he finally said. I'm completely serious. You made your choice on Tuesday when you decided I wasn't welcome at the hospital. Now I'm making mine. But Jade and Noah are your responsibility, Hugo. Your wife, your child, your bill. You're a grown man with a job and insurance. Figure it out. I can't believe you're this petty. And there it was. The word that summarized how my family had always viewed my reasonable responses to their unreasonable behavior. Petty. Petty would be showing up at the hospital and causing a scene. Petty would be calling our parents and telling them what you did. This isn't petty, Hugo. This is me finally learning that money doesn't buy respect, and I won't pay to keep being treated like garbage. He started to say something else, but I hung up. My hands were trembling, but not from anger anymore. From relief. For the first time in my adult life, I'd set a clear boundary with my family and stuck to it. Hugo would call back, probably multiple times, but I'd said what needed to be said. The ball was in his court now, and somehow, I suspected this game was just getting started. Hugo called 17 times over the next 2 days. I know because I counted. Each voicemail followed the same pattern. Anger, followed by pleading, followed by guilt, and finally threats. By day 3, his desperation was palpable through the phone. "Luna, pick up the damn phone. This is ridiculous. Jade hasn't slept in 48 hours because she's stressed about when we can bring Noah home. You're hurting an innocent baby because you're mad at me. Delete. I don't understand why you're being like this. We're family. Family helps each other during emergencies. This is what normal people do. Delete. Fine. You want an apology? I'm sorry, okay? I was stressed on Tuesday and maybe I overreacted. But this is bigger than hurt feelings. Just call me back. Delete." The fourth voicemail was different. His voice was raw, exhausted. "Luna, I'm begging you. They won't let us leave until the bill is settled. We can set up a payment plan, but we need someone to guarantee it first. The insurance covered most of it, but there's still $4,000 left. I know I messed up, but please don't punish Jade and Noah for my mistakes." $4,000. So the bill had gotten smaller, or he was lying about the total. Either way, it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the principle. I was in the middle of a client presentation when my assistant slipped me a note. "Emergency call from Jade Martinez. Says it's urgent." My stomach clenched, but I finished my presentation before returning the call. If this was another manipulation tactic, I wanted to be thinking clearly. "Luna?" Jade's voice was exhausted, strained. "Hi, Jade. How are you feeling?" "Horrible. We've been at this hospital for 5 days now. Noah's fine. I'm fine. But they won't discharge us until the bill situation is resolved." 5 days. That seemed excessive for a normal delivery. What exactly happened with the insurance? I don't know. Hugo handles all our finances. He says there were complications with the billing codes or something. "Luna, I just want to take my baby home." The exhaustion in her voice was genuine. Whatever Hugo had told the hospital about my financial responsibility, Jade was clearly suffering for it. "Has Hugo explained why the hospital thinks I'm responsible for your bill?" A pause. "He said he mentioned to someone that you were successful and might be able to help if needed, but he swears he didn't promise anything specific." Hugo was still lying, even to his own wife. The hospital had been very clear about what he'd told them. "Jade, I need you to know something. The hospital called me directly and said Hugo specifically told their billing department that his millionaire sister would cover all delivery expenses. He used my name and promised my money without asking me first." Silence. "That's not... Hugo wouldn't do that without asking you first." "I have the phone records, Jade." The billing representative was very specific about what Hugo told them. Another long pause. When Jade spoke again, her voice was different. Smaller. "I'm so tired, Luna. I just want to go home. Can we work something out? I promise we'll pay you back." This was the moment I'd been dreading. Jade, sweet, exhausted, innocent Jade, caught in the middle of her husband's manipulation and my boundary setting. "Jade, can I ask you something? And I need you to be honest with me." "Okay. Are you happy in your marriage, I mean? In your... Is Hugo treating you well?" The pause that followed told me everything I needed to know. That's a complicated question, Luna." "No, it's really not. Either he respects you and treats you as an equal partner, or he doesn't. Marriage is hard, especially with a new baby and money stress, and..." She was making excuses for him, the same way our parents had always made excuses for Hugo's behavior. "Jade, I want to help you, but I won't enable Hugo's financial irresponsibility or his assumption that my money is available to solve his problems. Those are two different things." "I don't understand the difference." "The difference is that helping you means making sure you and Noah are safe and supported. Enabling Hugo means teaching him that he can make promises with other people's money and face no consequences." When Jade spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "What if I told you there were other things, other problems beyond just this hospital bill?" My grip tightened on the phone. "What kind of other problems?" "I can't talk about it now. Hugo will be back from the cafeteria soon. But Luna, there are things you don't know. Things I've been too scared to tell anyone." And just like that, the game changed completely. "Jade, are you safe?" "Physically, yes. But Luna, I think I might need help. Real help. The kind that goes beyond hospital bills." Before I could respond, I heard Hugo's voice in the background. "Who are you talking to?" "I have to go," Jade whispered. "But Luna, can I call you tomorrow? When he's not around?" "Yes," I said immediately. "Call me anytime, day or night." The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone with 1,000 new questions, and the growing certainty that this situation was much bigger than a hospital bill. Whatever Jade needed to tell me tomorrow was going to change everything. The call came at 6 in the morning. I was already awake, nursing coffee and watching the sunrise through my kitchen window. I'd barely slept, thinking about the fear I'd heard in Jade's voice, and the careful way she'd looked over her shoulder before hanging up. "Luna?" Jade's voice was a whisper, urgent and scared. "I'm here. Are you okay?" "I'm in the hospital bathroom. Hugo's still sleeping, but he'll wake up soon. I don't have much time. Tell me what's going on." "The hospital bill isn't the real problem. Hugo has been gambling online. A lot. We're in debt up to our eyeballs. And I didn't know until last week." The words tumbled out in a rush, like she'd been holding them back for so long that they exploded the moment she found someone to tell. "How much debt?" $70,000, maybe more. He's been using my name for loans without telling me. My credit is destroyed, and I didn't even know. $70,000. Suddenly, the hospital bill seemed like loose change. "Jesus, Jade. When did you find out?" 3 days ago, a creditor called my phone looking for Hugo. When I told him Hugo wasn't available, the man said maybe I could help since the loan was in my name. "Luna, I've never applied for a loan in my life." My hands tightened around my coffee mug. Identity theft, financial abuse. Hugo wasn't just irresponsible, he was criminal. "What did Hugo say when you confronted him?" "He cried, said he had a gambling problem but that he was getting help. Promised it would never happen again. Begged me not to tell anyone because it would ruin his career." "And you believed him?" A bitter laugh. "I wanted to. But then the next day I found betting apps hidden on his phone. Thousands of dollars in transactions from the past month alone. He'd been lying to my face while promising to change." "Jade, you need to get out of there. It's not that simple. I have a 3-day-old baby, no job, nowhere to go. And Hugo keeps saying he'll get help, that we can work through this together." I closed my eyes, recognizing the pattern. Hugo had always been a master manipulator, but this was next-level emotional abuse. "He's isolated you, hasn't he? From friends, from family, from anyone who might help you think clearly?" Silence. Then quietly, "He says people don't understand our relationship, that they're jealous of what we have, that only he really loves me." Classic abuser playbook. Isolation disguised as exclusive love? Jade, manipulation always comes wrapped in exclusive love. The people who really love you want you to have support systems, not depend entirely on them. I know that now. But Luna, I'm scared. What if I can't make it on my own? What if I can't provide for Noah? What if you can't provide for Noah if you stay? Hugo's gambling addiction isn't going to magically disappear because he has a baby to feed. If anything, the pressure will make it worse. I heard movement in the background, and Jade's voice became even quieter. "He's waking up. I have to go." "Jade, wait. Before you hang up, do you want help getting out?" Real help, not just money. The pause stretched so long I thought she'd already hung up. "Yes," she whispered finally. "God, yes. I'm so tired of being scared and apologizing for things that aren't my fault. But Luna, if I do this, there's no going back. Hugo will never forgive either of us." "Good," I said firmly. "Some people don't deserve forgiveness. They deserve consequences." "What would I need to do?" "First, you need a lawyer. Someone who specializes in family law and financial abuse. Second, you need documentation of all the loans and debts Hugo opened in your name. And third, you need to be absolutely sure about this decision, because once we start, we finish it. I'm sure. I've been sure for months. I just didn't have the courage to admit it. But watching him promise you money that wasn't his to promise, seeing how he treated you at the hospital, I can't pretend anymore that this is normal. Then we do this right. I'll make some calls this morning and have names for you by tonight." "Luna? Yeah? Thank you. For not just writing me off with Hugo, for seeing that I was trapped instead of complicit." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen as morning light filled the room, thinking about how completely the situation had shifted. 24 hours ago, I'd thought this was about a hospital bill and family boundaries. Now I understood it was about something much more serious, getting Jade and Noah away from a man who viewed them as extensions of himself, rather than people with their own rights. Have you ever experienced someone close to you revealing they needed help escaping a toxic situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your support might help someone else recognize the signs. Hugo had spent years positioning himself as the responsible one, the successful one, the one who had his life together while I was just his dramatic little sister. But scratch the surface of his perfect facade, and underneath was financial chaos, emotional abuse, and a gambling addiction he'd been hiding behind borrowed money and other people's names. By lunchtime, I had 3 attorney recommendations and a plan that would either free Jade from an abusive marriage or destroy what remained of my relationship with my family forever. Honestly, at this point, I was hoping for both. By Tuesday afternoon, I had Jade connected with Patricia Morrison, a family law attorney who specialized in cases involving financial abuse and coercive control. Patricia came highly recommended, and more importantly, she understood that leaving an abusive marriage with a newborn required careful planning and absolute discretion. The most dangerous time for abuse victims is when they try to leave, Patricia explained during our three-way call. We need to document everything before Hugo realizes what's happening. Jade had been busy. 3 days of secretly photographing loan documents, saving text messages, and recording Hugo's promises to fix everything, while simultaneously placing new bets on his phone. The evidence was damning and comprehensive. He's been forging my signature for months, Jade told us, her voice steadier than I'd heard it since this all began. I found credit card applications, loan documents, even a second mortgage on our house that I never signed. That's identity theft and forgery, Patricia said bluntly. Federal crimes. We can use this. But Hugo wasn't going down without a fight. When the divorce papers were served on Thursday morning, his reaction was exactly what I'd expected. Pure rage followed by desperate manipulation. My phone started ringing at 11:47 a.m. You vindictive bitch, Hugo snarled the moment I answered. You turned my wife against me. You destroyed my family. Hello to you too, Hugo. How's fatherhood treating you? Don't you dare act innocent. Jade was fine until you got in her head with your feminist nonsense. Now she's filing for divorce and taking my son away from me. Your son, not our son or Noah. Possession, not love. Jade filed for divorce because you've been stealing her identity and gambling away your family's future. I just gave her the attorney's number. She's confused. Postpartum depression makes women irrational. She doesn't know what she's doing. Classic Hugo. Blame everyone except himself. Jade's perfectly rational decision to leave her lying, gambling, financially abusive husband was suddenly a mental health crisis. You know what I think, Hugo? I think you're scared. For the first time in your life, you can't control the narrative. Jade sees through your lies. I'm not paying your bills. And you're about to face the consequences of your own choices. If she goes through with this divorce, I'll destroy her in court. I'll prove she's an unfit mother. I'll get full custody of Noah, and you'll never see either of them again. And there it was. The threat I'd been waiting for. Hugo's nuclear option, the one card he thought would make me back down. That's interesting, I said calmly, because Patricia already anticipated you'd try that approach. Silence. See, Hugo, the thing about hiring an experienced attorney is that they've seen every manipulation tactic before. Patricia represents women like Jade all the time, women whose husbands threaten to take their children away unless they stay silent about financial abuse. You can't prove anything. Actually, I can prove everything. Every forged signature, every loan you opened in Jade's name, every gambling transaction while you were promising to change. Oh, and my personal favorite, the messages where you explicitly forbid Jade from bringing Noah to see me because I'm supposedly a bad influence. I heard him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. You want to talk about unfit parenting, Hugo? Let's talk about a father who steals his wife's identity to fund his gambling addiction. Let's discuss a man who lies to hospitals about who's paying bills and then emotionally manipulates his exhausted wife when his schemes fall apart. Luna, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You thought you could control Jade forever by isolating her and making her financially dependent on you. You thought you could use me as your personal ATM whenever your poor choices caught up with you. And you thought you could threaten custody to keep Jade trapped. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments. I have a feeling you're going to be surprised by how this plays out. But here's what you didn't count on, Hugo. Jade kept everything. Every document, every text, every recording of you promising to change while placing new bets. And I kept detailed records of every conversation we've had, including this one. You're recording me? I'm learning from your example. Documentation is everything in legal proceedings. The silence stretched longer this time. When Hugo spoke again, his voice had lost its angry edge and taken on something closer to panic. What do you want? Money? I'll pay you back everything. With interest. Just convince Jade to drop this divorce nonsense. I don't want your money, Hugo. I want you to understand something very clearly. You're not losing your wife because of me. You're losing your wife because of your choices. And you're not losing control over Jade's life. You're losing the illusion that you ever had the right to control it in the first place. She'll never make it on her own. She has no job, no money, no support system. She has Noah, she has me, and she has something you never gave her, the freedom to make her own decisions. That's more support than she ever got from you. I heard papers rustling in the background, like he was frantically searching through documents. This isn't over, he said finally. You're right, I agreed. This is just the beginning, because now comes the part where you actually face consequences for your actions, instead of having other people clean up your messes. After I hung up, I sat in my office feeling something I hadn't experienced in years when it came to my family: optimism. Hugo's world was crumbling, and for once it wasn't because someone else had failed to support him. It was because his own choices had finally caught up with him. And Jade? Jade was about to discover what life looked like when someone actually had her back instead of just having her trapped. Jade and Noah arrived in my city on a rainy Sunday morning, everything they owned packed into 2 suitcases and a diaper bag. Watching her step out of the taxi with my nephew in her arms felt like watching someone emerge from underwater, relief mixed with the exhaustion of holding her breath for too long. "Hi," she said simply, standing on my doorstep looking younger than her 24 years. "Hi yourself. Come on, let's get you both inside where it's warm." I'd spent the previous week transforming my guest room into a nursery. A crib ordered overnight, soft blankets in gender-neutral colors, a rocking chair positioned near the window where morning light would stream in gently. If Jade and Noah were going to stay with me while she figured out her next steps, they deserved a space that felt like home rather than temporary shelter. Noah was perfect. All dark hair and serious expressions, like he was already contemplating the complexities of the world he'd been born into. When Jade placed him in my arms for the first time, I felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't just my nephew. He was family in the truest sense, untainted by the dysfunction that had shaped my relationship with his father. "He looks like you," I told Jade, studying his features. "Thank God for that," she laughed. But there was an edge to it. Hugo was convinced he'd be a carbon copy of him. We spent the afternoon getting them settled, establishing routines, talking about practical things, pediatrician appointments, legal meetings, the logistics of starting over. But as evening fell and Noah slept peacefully in his new crib, the conversation turned to deeper waters. "Luna, I need to tell you something," Jade said, curled up on my couch with a cup of tea warming her hands. "About why I stayed with Hugo for so long. About why I let our friendship fade away. You don't owe me explanations?" "Yes, I do. Because what happened between us wasn't just about teenage drama or growing apart. It was calculated." I settled into the chair across from her, sensing this was going to be one of those conversations that changed how I understood the past. When Hugo and I first started dating, I thought he was protecting me. He'd say things like, "Luna's always been jealous of what we have," or "She's trying to come between us because she can't handle seeing you happy." He made it sound like caring about our relationship. The words stung. But they didn't surprise me. Hugo had always been masterful at reframing his control as concern. "At first, I defended you. But Hugo was patient. He never demanded I choose between you and him outright. Instead, he'd get hurt whenever I mentioned spending time with you. He'd sulk or withdraw affection until I learned to avoid bringing you up altogether. Classic isolation tactics," I said quietly. "Make the victim feel guilty for maintaining other relationships." Exactly. And by the time I realized what was happening, years had passed. I'd moved to another state, started a new life, and the distance made it easier to convince myself that maybe Hugo was right. Maybe our friendship had just run its natural course. Jade set down her tea and looked at me directly. "But last week, when you refused to pay that hospital bill, something clicked into place." Hugo was furious. Not hurt, not disappointed, but genuinely shocked that someone had told him no. And I realized that I hadn't seen him that rattled since the last time you stood up to him when we were teenagers. "What do you mean?" "Remember when he tried to convince our parents that you'd been drinking at that party junior year? When you had witnesses proving you'd been designated driver all night?" I remembered. Hugo had been caught drinking by a neighbor and tried to deflect blame onto me. Our parents had almost believed him until 3 other students confirmed my story. He was so angry that night. Not because he got in trouble, but because his plan hadn't worked. Because for once, people believed you instead of him. Jade pulled a throw pillow into her lap, hugging it like armor. I think that's when I started to understand that Hugo's problem wasn't jealousy about our friendship. It was envy about your independence. You've never needed anyone to validate your worth or make decisions for you. That threatened him then, and it threatens him now. The insight hit like a revelation. All these years, I'd assumed Hugo resented me because he thought I was irresponsible or beneath the family's standards. But Jade was suggesting something different, that he'd been threatened by my autonomy itself. He told me once that the reason he fell in love with me was because I needed him, Jade continued. At the time, I thought it was romantic. Now I realize it was a confession. Needing someone and being controlled by them are 2 very different things, I said. I know that now, But Luna, I need you to understand something else. Leaving Hugo, filing for divorce, coming here with Noah, it isn't just about escaping a bad marriage. It's about refusing to let anyone else decide who I'm allowed to love or who I'm allowed to be. Something in her voice broke open as she said those words, and I realized we were both crying. I'm so sorry, she whispered, for all the years I let him come between us, for believing his version of who you were instead of trusting what I knew to be true. You don't need to apologize for surviving, I told her. You did what you had to do in an impossible situation. But I want to start over. Not just pretend the past didn't happen, but actually build something new between us. Something that's ours, not shaped by his insecurities or anyone else's expectations. I reached for her hand across the space between us. Yes, I said simply. Together. The right way this time. Outside, rain continued to fall against the windows, but inside, something that had been broken for 8 years was finally beginning to heal. Patricia Morrison called Tuesday morning with news that made me smile into my coffee cup. Hugo's attorney wants to negotiate, she said, barely containing her own satisfaction. Apparently, when they reviewed our evidence file, they advised their client that fighting this divorce would be what they diplomatically termed inadvisable. What kind of evidence are we talking about? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. Everything. Bank records showing the gambling transactions, forged loan applications with Jade's signature, recorded phone calls where he promises to stop betting while simultaneously placing new wagers. Oh, and my personal favorite, security footage from the hospital showing him preventing you from seeing Noah while promising the billing department you'd pay for everything. Hugo had unknowingly documented his own downfall. Every lie, every manipulation, every moment of control had left a digital trail that his own attorney was now recommending he not try to defend in court. What's he offering? Full custody to Jade, no alimony claims against her, and he'll take responsibility for all debts incurred in her name. In exchange, Jade agrees not to press criminal charges for the identity theft. It was more than we dared hope for. Hugo was essentially surrendering everything rather than risk public exposure of his gambling addiction and financial fraud. What does Jade think? She wants to accept. The sooner this is over, the sooner she can focus on building a stable life for Noah without looking over her shoulder. That afternoon, Jade and I took Noah for his first walk through my neighborhood. The autumn air was crisp, leaves crunching under our feet as we pushed his stroller down tree-lined streets. Watching Jade point out flowers and birds to her sleeping baby, I was struck by how different she looked. The tension that had lived in her shoulders for years was finally starting to ease. Patricia says we could have the divorce finalized within 60 days, Jade said as we paused at a small park. How are you feeling about it? Relieved, scared, guilty for feeling relieved. She adjusted Noah's blanket carefully. Is it wrong that I'm not sadder about my marriage ending? It's wrong that your marriage made you sad enough that ending it feels like freedom. We found a bench where we could sit while Noah napped in his stroller. The park was quiet except for the sound of children playing on distant swings. I keep thinking about what our lives would have looked like if Hugo hadn't convinced me to cut ties with you, Jade said. If I'd had someone to talk to about his gambling, his controlling behavior, his mood swings when he lost money. You can't change the past, I reminded her, but you can decide what happens next. I want to go back to school, she said suddenly. Before Hugo, I was studying early childhood education. I only had 1 semester left when I dropped out to support his career move. This was the first time Jade had mentioned her own abandoned dreams. Hugo's version of their relationship had always portrayed him as the ambitious one making sacrifices, while Jade provided emotional support. What stopped you from finishing? Hugo said it was impractical. That we needed my income from waitressing more than we needed another degree. He convinced me that his business success would benefit us both more than my teaching career. More manipulation disguised as practical advice. Hugo had systematically dismantled every aspect of Jade's independence. Her friendships, her education, her career goals, while positioning himself as the reasonable partner, making logical decisions. You could finish now, I suggested. Online programs, part-time schedules. It might take longer with Noah, but it's not impossible. Could I really? At 24 with a baby and no money? Jade, you left an abusive marriage with a 3-week-old infant and no support system except me. If you can do that, you can absolutely finish your education. She was quiet for several minutes, watching other mothers push their children on swings. I spent so many years making myself smaller to fit into Hugo's idea of what our life should look like, she said finally. I forgot that I had ideas of my own. Now, you get to remember. That evening, while Jade fed Noah and I made dinner, My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it without reading, assuming it was spam, but something made me check. This is Hugo. I know you think you've won, but this isn't over. I'll find a way to get my son back. I showed the message to Jade, who read it with more exhaustion than fear. He still doesn't get it, she said. Noah isn't something to be won or lost. He's a person who deserves parents who put his needs first. Do you want me to forward this to Patricia? Yes. She said documenting any threatening communication would be important if he tries to challenge the custody arrangement later. I sent the screenshot to Patricia with a brief explanation. Her response came back within minutes. Adding this to the file. Hugo's making this easier than it needs to be. Later that night, after Jade had gone to bed and Noah was sleeping peacefully in his crib, I sat in my living room thinking about how completely our lives had changed in less than 2 weeks. Hugo had spent 8 years isolating Jade from everyone who might support her independence. He'd convinced her that love meant dependence, that protection meant control, that his jealousy was proof of his devotion. But isolation works both ways. While Hugo was busy cutting Jade off from external perspectives, he was also cutting himself off from people who might have helped him address his gambling addiction before it destroyed his family. Now he was facing the consequences of those choices. A wife who no longer believed his promises, a sister who wouldn't subsidize his irresponsibility, and a son he might see only under court-supervised visitation. Meanwhile, Jade was rediscovering who she'd been before Hugo convinced her she needed his permission to exist. And Noah would grow up in a home where love meant support rather than control, where family meant people who encouraged your growth rather than demanded your dependence. Hugo thought he was losing a game he'd been winning for years. The truth was, he'd never been winning anything. He'd just been holding people hostage with their own love for him. Now the hostages had been freed, and Hugo was left alone with the wreckage of his own making. 3 weeks later, I got a call that crystallized just how completely Hugo's carefully constructed world had crumbled. Ms. Martinez, this is Detective Sarah Chen with the County Fraud Investigation Unit. We're calling regarding financial crimes committed by Hugo Martinez. We understand you're his sister? My blood went cold. Yes, I am. What kind of financial crimes? Your brother has been arrested for identity theft, forgery, and fraud. We found evidence that he opened multiple credit lines using his wife's social security number and forged documentation. The total amount exceeds $50,000, which makes this a felony case. Patricia had warned us this might happen. When banks started investigating the loans Jade disputed, they'd uncovered a pattern of fraudulent applications that went beyond just their marriage. We're hoping you might provide character testimony about his gambling behavior, Detective Chen continued. Records show he also attempted to use your name as financial guarantee for medical expenses without authorization. I'll cooperate however I can, I said. But Detective, what does this mean for his wife and child? They've already filed for divorce. Mrs. Martinez isn't considered a suspect. Our investigation shows she was a victim of her husband's financial fraud, not a participant. However, she may need to testify about the timeline of when she discovered the unauthorized accounts. After hanging up, I found Jade in the nursery, gently rocking Noah while he fussed through a particularly difficult afternoon. She looked up when I entered, and I could see she already knew from my expression that the news wasn't good. They arrested him, didn't they? This morning. Detective Chen says the banks found evidence of systematic fraud going back 2 years. Jade's grip tightened on Noah, but her voice remained steady. How long could he go to prison? She didn't say, but Patricia mentioned identity theft is a federal crime with mandatory minimum sentences. We sat in silence for several minutes, both processing what this meant. Jade had wanted freedom from Hugo's control, but neither of us had anticipated he'd end up facing criminal charges that could destroy his career and reputation permanently. I should feel sorry for him, Jade said finally. He's Noah's father and prison will ruin his life. But Luna, I just feel empty, like I'm watching consequences catch up to a stranger. That's normal. You can't love someone back into being a good person, and you can't feel guilty for their choices catching up with them. Do you think Noah will ask about his father someday? Want to know why Daddy isn't around? Noah will ask questions. And when he does, you'll tell him age-appropriate truths, that his father made choices that hurt people, and that sometimes adults face consequences for hurting others. What if Hugo tries to come back into our lives after prison? What if he claims he's changed and wants another chance? This was the question that had been keeping me awake at night. Hugo was manipulative enough to spend years in prison planning his redemption narrative, positioning himself as a man who'd overcome addiction and deserved forgiveness. That's why the divorce settlement was so important, I reminded her. Legal custody agreements don't disappear because someone serves their sentence. And Patricia made sure any future visitation would require court approval and supervision. Jade stood up, moving to the window where late afternoon sun cast gentle patterns across the floor. You know what's strange? I keep waiting to feel devastated about Hugo's arrest, waiting for some surge of loyalty or love that makes me want to support him through this crisis. And instead, I feel protective of the life we're building here. Noah and I are safe, stable, supported. Hugo's legal troubles feel like they're happening to someone from my past, not someone who's part of my present. That evening, Patricia called with additional details about Hugo's case. The prosecutor is offering a plea deal, she explained. 2 years in federal prison in exchange for full restitution to his victims and admission of guilt. If he refuses and goes to trial, he's looking at potentially 5 to 7 years. What happens to his parental rights if he takes the plea? That depends on several factors, but convicted felons generally face restrictions on unsupervised child custody. Given the nature of his crimes and the evidence of emotional manipulation, I'd expect any future visitation to be court-supervised and limited. After hanging up, I found Jade making bottles for Noah's night feeding, her movements efficient and calm. She'd adapted to single motherhood with remarkable grace, as if caring for Noah without constantly managing Hugo's moods had freed up emotional energy she'd forgotten she possessed. Patricia says he'll probably take the plea deal, I told her. Good. A trial would mean testifying, reliving everything. I'd rather move forward than spend months looking backward. Are you sure you're okay? This is a lot to process. Jade paused, a bottle halfway prepared, and looked at me with clear eyes. Luna, for 8 years I lived with someone who lied to me daily, who stole my identity, controlled my friendships, and made me question my own judgment about everything from finances to reality itself. His arrest doesn't feel like a tragedy. It feels like validation that I wasn't crazy for thinking something was seriously wrong. She resumed preparing the bottles, her voice taking on a strength I hadn't heard since we were teenagers. Hugo spent years convincing me that I needed him to survive, that I was too naive, too emotional, too dependent to make good decisions on my own. But look at me now. I left him, protected my son, found legal help, and started rebuilding my life from scratch. Turns out I was stronger than he ever gave me credit for. Stronger than he wanted you to believe you were, I corrected. Exactly. And Noah is going to grow up knowing his own strength, not questioning it because someone else needs to feel powerful. Later that night, as I watched Jade confidently handle Noah's late feeding, I realized something profound had shifted. She wasn't just surviving without Hugo. She was thriving. And Hugo was about to learn that the control he'd thought was his greatest strength had actually been his most devastating weakness. The call from my mother came on a Thursday morning, 6 weeks after Hugo's arrest, just as Jade and I were planning Noah's first Thanksgiving in our new life. Luna, we need to talk. Mom's voice carried that particular tone she used when family appearances were at stake. About what? About this situation with your brother. The way you've handled everything. It's gone too far. I almost laughed. After 8 years of Hugo excluding me from family events, manipulating his wife, and stealing money from multiple victims, my mother was concerned that I'd let things go too far. Which part went too far, Mom? The part where I refused to pay bills I didn't agree to, or the part where I helped Jade escape financial abuse? Hugo made mistakes, but family doesn't abandon family during difficult times. He needs support right now, not judgment. He needs accountability. There's a difference. Luna, he's been calling us from jail. He's genuinely remorseful about his gambling problem. He wants to make amends, but you've turned everyone against him. This was vintage family dysfunction. The perpetrator becomes the victim the moment consequences arrive. Mom, Hugo committed identity theft and fraud, multiple felonies. He didn't make mistakes. He made criminal choices that hurt people. Prison is going to ruin his life completely. His career, his reputation, his relationship with his son, all gone. How is that helping anyone? It's protecting future victims from his behavior. It's showing Noah that actions have consequences. And it's teaching Jade that she deserves better than being someone's emotional and financial hostage. Jade has always been dramatic. Marriage is hard work, and not every woman runs away the first time things get difficult. I felt anger flare in my chest. Our mother was minimizing years of abuse as marital difficulties, dismissing Jade's courage as drama. Running away? Mom, she left a man who stole her identity and gambled away their future while emotionally manipulating her into isolation. That's not running away from difficulty, that's escaping danger. I think you've filled her head with feminist nonsense about independence and self-sufficiency. Some women need guidance, Luna. Not every marriage works the same way yours would. And there it was, the underlying assumption that had shaped my family's view of relationships for generations. Some people lead, others follow. Some people make decisions, others comply. Hugo wasn't abusive, he was simply masculine in a way that required feminine submission. Jade doesn't need guidance, Mom. She needs respect. She needs a partner who treats her as an equal, not a subordinate. Well, now she has nothing. No husband, no financial security, no stable home for her baby. How is that better? She has her freedom, her dignity, and her son's respect when he's old enough to understand that she chose his safety over convenient lies. My mother sighed, the way she'd always done when my responses didn't match her expectations. Your father thinks we should have an intervention. Get the whole family together to discuss how to help Hugo rebuild his life when he gets out of prison. An intervention for what? He's already admitted guilt and accepted his sentence. The intervention he needed was 8 years ago when his gambling started, but everyone was too busy enabling his behavior to address it. Luna, he's your brother. He's also a convicted felon who spent years abusing his wife and stealing from multiple victims. Being related to him doesn't override those facts. So that's it? You're just writing him off forever? I looked across my kitchen where Jade was making breakfast while Noah played contentedly in his bouncer. They both looked relaxed, safe, genuinely happy for the first time since I'd known them. I'm not writing him off, Mom. I'm refusing to participate in the family tradition of making his problems everyone else's responsibility. If Hugo wants redemption, he can earn it through his own efforts, not emotional manipulation of people he's already hurt. What about forgiveness? What about second chances? What about accountability? What about learning from consequences instead of being rescued from them? After we hung up, Jade looked at me with raised eyebrows. Family pressure? The usual. Hugo's the victim now because prison is hard and his choices have finally caught up with him. Are you okay? I considered the question seriously. A month ago, disappointing my family would have sent me into days of guilt and self-doubt. Today, it felt like maintaining healthy boundaries. Actually, yeah, I'm okay. For the first time in my adult life, I'm making decisions based on my values instead of family expectations. What are your values? That people should face consequences for their choices. That victims deserve support, not judgment. That love without respect isn't really love at all. Jade smiled, lifting Noah from his bouncer to settle him in his high chair. Those sound like good values to build a family around. Is that what we're doing? Building a family? Aren't we? She gestured around the kitchen where Noah's bottles shared space with my coffee maker, where children's books sat next to my business magazines. We're two adults who love each other platonically, raising a baby together, supporting each other's dreams. If that's not family, what is? She was right. Over the past 2 months, we'd created something neither of us had experienced in our original families. Unconditional support without strings attached, love without control, loyalty without enabling dysfunction. Does that scare you? I asked, building something different from what we grew up with. It terrifies me, Jade admitted, but not as much as staying trapped in patterns that never worked. That afternoon, I got a text from Hugo, his first direct communication since the arrest. Luna, I know I messed up. When I get out, I want to make things right. Please don't turn my son against me. I showed the message to Jade, who read it with the weary expression of someone who'd parsed Hugo's manipulative language for years. Notice how he's asking you not to turn Noah against him, instead of acknowledging that his own choices might accomplish that goal? Classic deflection. It's my potential influence he's worried about, not his actual behavior. Exactly. Some people change in prison, but most just get better at managing their image. I deleted Hugo's message without responding. Because the best revenge against someone who tried to control your life isn't elaborate punishment, it's the simple act of moving forward without them. 1 year later, I was standing in the kitchen of our new house. Yes, our house. Because Jade and Noah and I had officially become a family unit that confused realtors, but worked perfectly for us. When my phone rang with a call that felt like the final chapter of an old story. Hugo had been released after serving 18 months of his 2-year sentence. Early release for good behavior, according to my mother's carefully neutral update 3 days earlier. Luna, it's Hugo. His voice sounded different, smaller. The commanding tone that had dominated every conversation for 30 years was gone, replaced by something that might have been genuine humility. Hi, Hugo. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to call. To apologize. Really apologize, not just say words because someone told me to. I looked across the kitchen where Jade was helping 16-month-old Noah stack blocks. both of them laughing when the tower inevitably tumbled down. In the year since Hugo's arrest, Noah had learned to walk, say Mama, and Auntie Luna, and sleep through the night. He had no memory of his father, no anxiety about missing pieces of his family structure. "I'm listening," I told Hugo. "I destroyed everything good in my life because I couldn't admit I had a problem. The gambling, the lying, the way I treated you and Jade, I convinced myself that controlling everything around me would somehow control the chaos inside my head." This was more self-awareness than I'd heard from Hugo in decades. Prison gave me time to think without distractions. No phones, no betting apps, no ability to run from what I'd done. I had to face the fact that I'd emotionally abused my wife, stolen her identity, alienated my sister, and traumatized everyone who tried to love me. "What do you want from me, Hugo?" "Nothing. I'm not calling to ask for money or forgiveness or a relationship with Noah that I haven't earned. I'm calling because you deserved an apology years ago, and I was too proud and scared to give you one." I sat down at our kitchen table, processing this version of my brother who sounded like an actual adult taking responsibility for his choices. "I spent 18 months in therapy, Luna. Real therapy, not just anger management classes to satisfy the court. I learned about addiction, about control, about the way I'd been using other people's emotions to avoid dealing with my own problems. And I realized that every time I told you that you were dramatic or too sensitive or a bad influence, I was really saying that your independence threatened my need to be the most important person in everyone's life. This insight was so accurate, it was almost startling. I was jealous of you," he continued. "Not your money or your success, but your ability to be happy without needing constant validation from other people. You built a life based on your own values instead of trying to control everyone else's choices. Hugo, I'm not asking you to forgive me or let me back into your life. I just needed you to know that I finally understand the difference between an apology and an excuse. And that everything that happened to my marriage, my relationship with Noah, my criminal charges, all of it was consequences of my own behavior, not anyone else's choices." After we hung up, I sat quietly for several minutes, absorbing this conversation with a version of my brother I'd never met before. Jade looked up from the living room where she was reading to Noah. "How was that?" Surprisingly genuine, like he might actually understand what he did wrong instead of just being sorry he got caught. "Does that change anything for you?" I considered the question carefully. Did Hugo's apparent growth change my feelings about the past 8 years? Did his accountability alter my decision to build a life that didn't include him? "No," I said finally. "I'm glad he's getting help and taking responsibility. But acknowledgement of past damage doesn't automatically create future trust. What if he wants to meet Noah someday? Then he'll need to prove through consistent actions over time that he's capable of putting Noah's needs ahead of his own ego. Words are a start, but they're just a start." That evening, as I watched Jade help Noah with his bedtime routine, the comfortable domestic rhythm we'd developed over months of shared parenting, I realized something profound about the difference between forgiveness and trust. I could forgive Hugo for the years of manipulation, the hospital humiliation, the financial schemes that had hurt his own wife. Forgiveness was about releasing my own anger, not about restoring our relationship to some previous state. But trust? Trust was earned through consistency over time. Trust was demonstrated through actions that prioritized other people's well-being over personal convenience. Hugo had spent one phone call apologizing for 30 years of self-centered behavior. That apology mattered, but it didn't erase the need for him to prove through sustained effort that he'd actually changed rather than just learned better language for managing his image. Meanwhile, Jade had completed her teaching degree through online courses while raising Noah. She'd started working part-time at a local elementary school and was already being recognized for her innovative approaches to helping children from difficult family situations. Noah was thriving in a home where love meant encouragement rather than control, where the adults in his life modeled healthy communication instead of manipulation tactics. And me? I'd learned that the family you're born into doesn't have to define the family you create. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable dysfunction, even when that refusal looks like abandonment to people who benefit from your compliance. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about finding your strength in impossible situations. Your engagement helps other people find these stories when they need to hear that walking away from toxic family dynamics isn't giving up. It's choosing yourself. Hugo thought his greatest punishment would be losing control over his wife and son. The truth was more complex. His greatest loss was realizing that the control he'd fought so hard to maintain had never been real love at all. And his greatest potential redemption wouldn't come from being welcomed back into our lives, but from learning to love the people around him without needing to own them. Whether he was capable of that kind of love remained to be seen. But Noah would grow up knowing the difference between love and possession, support and control, family and ownership, and that knowledge would protect him from ever accepting less than he deserved from anyone who claimed to love him.